Clan War League is around the corner, so that means we have got some bases for you once again. So in this video I'll share you the top 10 current bases for Town Hall 17, which you can use to set you and your clan up for the upcoming Clan War League. With that, hello and welcome to yet another video. My name is Gum, and as you might hear, I am a little sick, or well, not a little sick, I'm quite sick, but still wanted to bring you some bases to set you up for the upcoming Clan War League. So I'm not going to do too much talking. All the base links, as always, are in the description. If you enjoy the bases and have a lot of success with it, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like on this video or subscribe to our channel to not miss any more upcoming videos. But let's dive right into the first base, where we have this diamond base from Esk, where you can already see it has a few baits. It's especially the one on 12 o'clock, where a lot of attackers just went in with a Royal Champion charge. Like, for example, it looks at first glance, it looks incredibly easy, and it also brings you a lot of value with like the cube launcher, with the geared defense, well, with the multi-gear tower, and just in general you can get a fire spitter. And if you would have that value, then you just have easy pathing for root riders to just completely overwhelm the base, because the rest of the damage is just incredibly spread out. And how you're defending root riders is most likely by just having main damage areas, which isn't really the case on this base. But the Royal Champion just doesn't have a great time at 12 o'clock, and you can also see that once you want to go into the town hall, you're going to catch every single one of that red air bomb farm. So just generally against root riders, this is for sure a great base. If you're regularly getting attacked by dragons, not so much, because, well, also for dragons the damage areas are just missing. So even if you would eat every single one of the giant bombs on 12 o'clock, you can just easily still get a lot of value with a long Royal Champion walk if you're using 11 invisibility spells. So therefore, but also most likely people are going to go in from the right hand or from the left hand side, where you will just get a lot of value, and you would make your way towards the core, towards the monolith relatively easily. And once you get rid of that monolith, dragons just have a great time crushing this base. But if you're regularly being attacked by root riders, I can for sure recommend copying this base, because it will most likely have a lot of success for you. Next up on the list is once again a base from Esk, but this time a box base. And you can also see at first glance you have quite a few overall champion charge baits, which would be the case in like 3 o'clock, where a lot of attackers just went in, because if you can get rid of the crush and mortar, you just have a great time with your root riders. So, and you can see those two Tesla in front of the town hall. They are quite interesting, because, well, if you do the exact plan that is baited right here, with like a short World Champion walk from the right hand side to get rid of the Crusher Mortar, and then you would most likely send in your root riders from like the Dark Elixir storage, where you would expect them to walk towards the R2 tower and then around the town hall. But due to this two Tesla, they will actually go towards the town hall, which is actually not good for the attacker, because most attackers would just want to walk around the town hall and overgrowth it, which is just not possible if your root riders just split and like a few root riders go to the town hall and like a few root riders go to the top. It is just screwing up some attacks. It has done that in some defenses. So once again, you have a great base against root riders, and that's just generally what you're trying to defend on Town Hall 17. But also with dragons, this base is just generally a little bit harder, because the damage is a little bit more clumped up, because you have some damage areas at like 12 o'clock, you have some damage areas at 3 o'clock, and also the core with like 2 multi-inferno towers, as well as the monolith, that can really not be underestimated. That is going to do a lot of harm to dragons. So if you can't get rid of the core, or like the whole core, with your Royal Champion charge, also dragons should be well defended on this base. Next base on the list is one from Camille, where we have once again a diamond base, but this time with an incredibly stacked town hall setup. So what most people are of course trying to do is get rid of the town hall, and like the damage area on top of the well, around the town hall with a world champion charge. But just generally, if you're then going to attack with root fighters or with dragons, you won't get more than the town hall compartment, which is just generally not enough value. So what you're most likely going to get is, of course, 2 ricochet cannons, as well as the multi-gear tower, as well as 2 expos, as well as the multi-inferno tower, as well as, of course, the town hall, which is great value. Not gonna lie, it's great value. You're going to get that with a long royal champion charge, but just the base you then have to face is just so incredibly large. You still have so much base left after that world champion charge, which is just so incredibly hard if you're going to attack with dragons or going to attack with root fighters. With root fighters, you can just instantly forget it. It's going to time fail no matter what. If it's not only going to fail because of like the monolith, as well as there's 2 multi-inferno towers you have in the core. But dragons, of course, they can't split, and some dragons can take care of the core, because, well, generally against dragons after that there's not much damage, because the damage is just incredibly spread out, but just time is most likely an issue. And with that, you would most likely already have defended dragons as well as root fighters, which is the 2 main strategies you want to defend. And if you're going to be attacked by a fireball attacker, to be honest, a good fireball attacker, you can't really defend that. If you're getting attacked by a great fireball attacker and he doesn't make any mistakes, you just have to hope for mistakes if you're getting attacked by a fireball player, because if they're not making any mistakes, they're going to get 3 stars. But that's just how the meta is in like the normal mode, in like the easy mode. In hard mode it's a different thing, but like in the normal clan wars and Legends League, if you're getting attacked by a good attacker that doesn't make any mistakes, most likely, of course, you're going to get 3 stars. But that's just how it is. And this base is also like great at provoking mistakes. With like, you quickly underestimate how good the rest of the base is. It's really hard to get enough world champion walk value to really get rid of the base. Either you're going to go into the town hall, where you just get the town hall compartment and the rest of the base is just left standing, or you go in from the other side, where you will get a good chunk of the base, but you still have to go through the town hall compartment that is really going to crush up some root fighters or dragons. Next base is another one from Camille, where you can see it is quite similar to the base we had before, so I don't need to talk about it too much. It's generally just the same setup, with like the town hall and the multi-gear tower at the 12 o'clock corner, and like the crusher mortar with a lot of damage at the bottom corner. And then just the rest of the base around it with like a few stack defenses in the core, if you just to make it a little bit hard for root fighters to get rid of the core. So the setup is quite similar, but in this base it's actually way harder to get rid of the town hall, because like you can see that there is a ring of defenses around the town hall, where on the other base you just had defenses directly next to the town hall that would lure your world champion towards the town hall, which isn't the case in this base. So it is easier to get to, so you need less invisibility spells to get to the town hall, but you need more than you expect. So people, if they want to get the town hall, they would most likely bring, I would say, 5 invisibility spells, which is just, if you don't pay attention and those Tesla pop up unluckily, or quite unfortunately, then it could be the case that those 5 invisibility spells are not sufficient, because you need to use some invisibility spells to follow your world champion in the direction where you want her to go. So that's also why this base can be easily underestimated by an attacker and therefore gain you some great defenses. Here we have another base from Camille, and once again we have a very similar setup, but this time with like an interesting, I would say an interesting core, as well as like an interesting way of like making that scatter shot, I mean those fire spitter compartments. So like this base more comes from the obscurity. So this base is very obscure, it doesn't look like a base you attack regularly. So in that way you can just really force the attacker into, or well, outside of their comfort zone, because most attacks or most approaches you do on bases you see regularly are not going to work on this base, because you just have to think a little bit outside of the box, because the base is just so incredibly, I would say, weird looking, with like the tunnel in the core, with like the weird core compartments, those weird dead zones in the core, as well as then the monolith and the multi-gear tower just being in two separate compartments, or well, one on the left and one on the right. Normally you would just see them in these straight lines, so like in the middle area, so like in the middle line of a diamond base, which is just not the case in this one. And then of course you want to kind of abuse the fire spitter compartments and just walk your siege barracks, or for example your archer queen, into there. But then of course the question is, how are you going to make pathing for your root fighters or your dragons? Because, well, basically you cannot. The pathing on this base is just absolutely disgusting, because you somehow have to get rid of the town hall compartments, but you can't really do a world champion walk for it, because it's just generally too expensive, because you of course also need a few overgrowths for the core of the base. So just generally it is so hard to find a working approach on this base. So therefore, if you're not playing against the most experienced clans, so for example in Champion 3 or Champion 2, this base could for sure be a game changer for you, because attackers just generally don't really know how to approach this base. Now we have this base from Nefe, which is of course once again a box base. Box bases are just incredibly popular currently in the meta, or well, box bases as well as diamond bases, but just box bases a little bit more. And on this base you're just most likely going to attack by the standard approach you have from this kind of bases. So for example, a world champion walk either from 12 o'clock or world champion walk from 3 o'clock, and then just some root riders into the tunnel or around the tunnel. So that's exactly where you see those traps. It's trapped relatively symmetrically, so you have some giant bombs on each side and then also a few black mines on each side, just to, well, have both approaches baited. So if the attacker goes in from 12 o'clock, they are going to catch some giant bombs. If they're going to go in from 3 o'clock, they're going to get some giant bombs, and either way their healers are going to catch some seeking air mines as well. And on that base, it's basically the most likely approach you're going to see. For dragons, it's just incredibly hard to get rid of that core, because, well, the pathing around those multi-inferno towers for World Champion walkers is just insanely good, and you somehow have to make your way with the World Champion into the core of the base, which would most likely cost around 2 to 3 funnel invisibility spells, which you just basically cannot afford. So therefore people are not going to want to attack this base with dragons. Of course, if they see a good approach, they of course can, but it's just incredibly hard to get rid of that core. And if you don't get rid of that core with the World Champion walk, your dragons could get shredded, because you can really not underestimate what 2 of those multi-inferno towers can actually do to dragons. Next up on the list is another base from Nefe, but this time we actually have our first anti-2-star base. And you can see we have the same approach baited for World Champion walks on either 3 o'clock or 12 o'clock, and then people were just going to send in the root riders into the town, or well, into the monolith compartment. And also, if you just see those Tesla and don't really know what they're there for, they're just basically to make a few World Champion charges more unpredictable. So people are going to go in from like the wizard tower at 6 o'clock or like at 9 o'clock, and then make their way into one of those compartments. And those Tesla are just going to make the pathing for your World Champion a little bit more unpredictable. So therefore it could mean that the attacker has to like waste 1 or 2 invisibility spells, because they're not predicting the pathing for the World Champion correctly. And that of course could mean that you don't get enough value with your World Champion charge, and therefore get the defense which you want. But generally what's going to make or break this base is that multi-gear tower in the core. That multi-gear tower is just doing some work in combination with the town hall. The town hall is just so tanky, and it's going to slow every single one of those troops up. So there's root riders up, there's dragons up, or just any troop in general. And then that multi-gear tower can really do some work. And that's what you're going to see on a lot of defenses. So once that multi-gear tower gets taken out, this base is going to get overrun quite easily. But if they don't get rid of that multi-gear tower with like the first stage of the attack, that multi-gear tower is really going to do some work. Next up is another base from Nefe, and this time we have a diamond base from him. And you can see 3 main baits for World Champion charges on 9 o'clock, on 6 o'clock and on 12 o'clock, which were just generally the most likely approaches. And from those approaches, 12 o'clock and 9 and 6 o'clock were just generally the 2 approaches that were used most of the times, because, well, if you go in from 9 o'clock, of course you get like a little bit of value. You get a multi-gear tower, you get a multi-archer tower, but due to that giga bomb, due to that mega bomb, you're just going to risk getting rid of your fox. And if you just get 2 defenses and then you lose your fox, that is really generally not good value. And of course you don't really have the best pathing after that, so therefore most people went in from like 6 o'clock or 12 o'clock and then tried to get more of the base, so like a bigger chunk of the base, mainly the scatter shot as well as the fire spitter. And that's just generally very hard if you don't bring enough invisibility spells, because that fox is going to go down. That fox is not going to survive those compartments. And if you just don't get the scatter shot, for example, with the World Champion charge, even though you're planning to go for it, it is just going to screw up pathing for your root riders. And for dragons, it's just incredibly hard to get rid of that monolith in the core. There's just not really any direction where you can go in from with the World Champion to get rid of that core monolith. Well, you could go in from the right hand side, to go in from 3 o'clock into the Town Hall compartment, then funnel your World Champion with 2 invisibility spells into the monolith. But then generally you're not going to get the value you need for dragons. There's still going to be a lot of base left after you've used up all your invisibility spells. So also in that case, dragons just are incredibly tough on this base, so surely something that's worth copying. Next up is a base from Sir Iron, where we once again have an incredibly nasty multi-gear tower in the core of the base, which you can see is completely surrounded by storage units. So you have like the Dark Elixir storage, you have the Clan Castle, you have 2 of the storages around that multi-gear tower. And it's just, once again, incredibly hard to get rid of that multi-gear tower with like the World Champion charge. So that means both of those multi-inferno towers as well as the multi-gear tower are going to stand up and are going to screw up some dragon attacks. So therefore, dragons are most likely ruled out on this base. So people are going to try to do a root rider attack, which would be the case if you like go in from with a World Champion walk from 3 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and you can see those are completely trapped. So you're going to lose your fox if you don't recall early enough. So if you want to go for the poison tower as well, you're going to lose your fox no matter what, which is going to be, of course, not exactly what you want. And then the pathing towards the Town Hall is just also not really nice. You just have 0 overgrowth value. You, of course, have to use an overgrowth spell on that Town Hall if you like then going in with root riders, but you can only basically hit the Town Hall and nothing else. And generally, after the overgrowth disappears, it is just incredibly hard for root riders to path towards the Town Hall, because you have just a ring of storages around the Town Hall, which root riders are just, well, going to walk around. So they just don't really see any reason on going towards the Town Hall. So you just have to hope for the World Champion to go to get it, and then the World Champion is like split from the main push. And that's like most likely how these attacks are going to thin out, because those troops just split up incredibly much. Some root riders will go to the left, some root riders will then go to the core multi-inferno towers, and then the attack just instantly thins out, because you have the monolith raining down fire, you have the crusher mortar raining down fire, and it's just going to instantly crush all of those root riders. And then in the long shot, in the back end, it is just too much left standing there. You still have the Barbarian King to go through, you still have the Tesla farm to go through, you still have the Minion Prince to go through, and that is just generally too much for those root riders. So if you're generally attacked by root riders, I could surely recommend you copying this base because it is going to do a lot of work against inexperienced attackers. Next up on the list is a base from Vibes, where we of course once again have a box base, and this base is just completely built against root riders. I could see it get crushed by dragons if you just get enough value with your root rider walk, with your royal champion walk, which would be the case if you go in from like any of those wizard towers at the 10 o'clock section. You're going to go into the monolith, and then you get to go 2 fire spitters, which is generally just a great amount of value, and then the pathing for dragons into the core of the base is just incredibly good. But if you're attacked by root riders, this base is just completely going to counter that. You have 2 of those ricochet cannons, you have 2 of those multi-inferno towers, just so isolated in that core with like a ring of storages around it. So root riders are not really going to make their way into that. Of course, you can't really afford to get them out of the way with a royal champion charge because they're just so far inside of the core. So you're going to do a small royal champion walk, and then making your way into those 2 ricochet cannons is just so incredibly hard. Some root riders are of course going to split into the ricochet cannons, or will split into the core. But if you just don't have every single one of your main push troops into the core, those ricochet cannons as well as the multi-inferno towers are going to fry every single troop down. So if like 3 root riders split into the core, they're gone in no time. They will not get a single defense down. And then of course the remaining root rider troops that are walking around the outside ring are also going to get taken care of. So generally you just have at first glance it looks very doable, this base, but if you're going to attack it, it is going to tear you apart. Which is of course exactly what you want. You want to give the attacker like a false hope of security, so they feel secure with their plan. They feel like, okay, this is going to work out, and then once they're in the attack, nothing is going how they have planned it to go. And that's exactly how you can get a defense in the Clan War League. So this base is of course also going to work against the top players in like Champions 1 and so forth. Because of course this base also did a lot of work in the Last Chance qualifier. With that, I would say see you guys soon, hopefully with a better voice and more energy and motivation. I wish you guys a wonderful rest of your weekend and a lot of success for the upcoming Clan War Leagues. Until then, see ya and bye bye.